What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they're not headed to the Super Bowl, but a number of former Steelers, including 3 starters, are. We're going to give shout outs to them here in a little bit. Meanwhile, one Pittsburgh Steelers star is voicing his opinions, was asked, let's not throw him under the bus here, was asked about his opinion about Patrick Mahomes, maybe having a little favoritism from the referees, and his response was pretty classic. Meanwhile, 2 quarterback options have emerged for the Pittsburgh Steelers with recent reports, and one of their own may be headed west. We'll dive into all of it, plus more. It is a sunny one here in the Berg. Kenny Pickett is headed to the Super Bowl. What a day in the city of Pittsburgh. How you feeling, my friend?
Yeah, I'm very excited for Kenny because you know what? After watching him this season, not on the field, obviously he's bad, but off the field, I feel like he's very good at holding a clipboard. So you know what? He deserves to be rewarded for that. So congrats to Kenny, and more so congrats to Juju because he had a pretty good game yesterday.
He did have a pretty good game yesterday, and Kenny had a great kneel down at the end of that Eagles game. You can't, can't have a victory without victory formation. So he's been working on that. Shout out to Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, Juju Smith-Schuster highlight 8 former Steelers who are headed to the Super Bowl. But the list also includes, former names, former clutch kickers like Matthew Wright, former punter who didn't make it because of Presley Harvin III, Braden Mann, good old Fred Johnson, LaRaven Clark is headed to the Super Bowl on top of Steven Nelson and Darius Rush. Now, I'll ask one question. We could care less. Everybody could care less about these Super Bowl people. In your wildest dreams, did you ever see LaRaven Clark being on an actual NFL roster in the Super Bowl while Steven Nelson was on a practice squad? Oh, hold up. Back up to 2 seconds. We forgot the biggest name that there is. Going for his third here in a three-peat. Chris Oladokun. In your wildest dreams, did you ever see LaRaven Clark making it on an active roster while Steven Nelson watches from home?
No, I think if you would have told me that a couple of years ago, I would have said, whatever you're smoking, pass it over. But you know what? That's where we're at right now. 2025 is a wild year, and Kenny Pickett's in the Super Bowl, and so is LaRaven Clark.
Yeah, it's crazy times. It's crazy. If you told me Kenny Pickett was gone, Russell Wilson was here, and Kenny was going to play in a Super Bowl in 2025, I'd be like, well, you're wrong, but you have a good time.
Clay is doing a lot of work in that sentence.
Yeah, you're right. You're not wrong, but he's out there. He's doing his thing. He did win them a game and lost them a game. So shout out Kenny Pickett. Shout out our boy Kenny Pickett. Let's talk a little bit of Super Bowl here, and we'll start with Cam Heyward, who was asked about Patrick Mahomes potentially being a flopper in the NFL, getting a couple of calls his way from the refs. It started with Troy Aikman very clearly calling out Patrick Mahomes on the broadcast, which was warranted, awesome. And I think every NFL fan who does not root for the Chiefs sat there and went, thank you, Troy, speaking for all of us. Cam said this, quote, yeah, Mahomes is going to get calls. He's been an MVP in our league, or in our game, and he sells tickets. As a defense, you're under a microscope when you play him. The second they think it's questionable, it's probably getting thrown. And he sells with the best of them. He's the Bruce Bowen. He's the Manu Ginobili when they're flopping and flailing their arms out there. I got to say, we all agree. Nobody disagrees with Cam Heyward here. Legendary, fantastic quote by Cam Heyward. Cam's getting a little snippy in his podcast days, and he's opening up a little bit more. And, you got to love, that's the best part about podcasts is these guys express themselves much more than they would in a scrum of media members, which, still value in the scrum of media members. But the podcasts, you get a little bit more. You get a little bit more fire. And Cam let a little bit of fire out there. Iconic quote. You got to give shout-outs, props where they're due, correct?
Yeah, I did not have Cam Heyward comparing Patrick Mahomes to Manu Ginobili on my bingo card, but unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. No, I loved it. It's saying the obvious, and it's just kind of, when everybody says it online, you can say, oh, yeah, okay, well, we all see it. But when an NFL player, one that has gone up against Patrick Mahomes on several occasions, sits there and is like, yeah, he does it and it happens. Like, he's going to do it. He's earned the right to do it. He almost got to that extent of saying, yeah, he's earned the right to do it. He's a multi-time MVP. That's going to happen. But I mean, it happens a lot. We saw it yesterday. Travis Kelce did it. After that first Mahomes rushing touchdown, Mahomes gets in somebody's face. Another player comes over and he throws his hands back like he's getting knocked over. Dude, you're one of the strongest human beings in the league. You're not knocked over that easily. So, and I love the fact that Cam's, doing his thing. I mean, he's setting up his second career perfectly and saying, hey, nothing is off limits. I'll say anything. And that's exactly what you want from Cam Heyward on his podcast.
I agree. I 100% agree. Is there any question who you rooting for in the Super Bowl?
I don't know. Part of me wants to see greatness, wants to see history.
No, you don't.
But at the same time, I told you last week whenever we were talking about the 4 teams remaining, I really like Saquon Barkley. So I would love to see him get an opportunity.
Yeah. I own 2 relevant jerseys these days, unless I think Manti Te'o's Notre Dame jersey is always relevant because just the story behind it. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to own that jersey? Saquon is one of them, not an Eagles jersey, is his rookie Giants jersey because, Saquon is a Penn State guy. I grew up outside, 2 hours from Penn State, but still Penn State ran through every neighborhood in my neighborhood. Saquon's the move. I'm not rooting for the Eagles. I'm not rooting for Kenny. I'm not rooting for the Chiefs. I'm rooting for Saquon Barkley. That is it. If Saquon wins MVP of the Super Bowl, it is all okay, and I'm very okay. Now, if he stinks or if the Chiefs win by 30, Monday morning I'll be a little hungover on the show. That's where we stand on this one, but we'll see what happens. All right, let's talk some quarterbacks here. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the reports that emerged all weekend long. It was an eventful weekend for the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback situation. I believe Pete Carroll got hired an hour after we jumped off the show on Friday, which sparked plenty of conversation. I got phone calls almost immediately, and I'll just tell you how this phone call started. Hello, how's it going? Hey, I'm not going to tell you what to write. I'll never tell you what to write. But you wouldn't be too off base if you started putting the narrative out there that maybe the Raiders are going to end up with Russell Wilson. I said, all right. That's pretty self-explanatory, but if you want to tell me a little bit more, that'd be great. And then that transpired into, there's interest. The word amends was used more than once. It just, momentum is there for Russell Wilson to go to Vegas. Now, fun fact, Russell Wilson considered 3 teams last offseason. Those 3 teams were the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants, and the Las Vegas Raiders, but he didn't get an opportunity to go to Vegas, and the Giants didn't really want him. So he ended up in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. Now that door is open. On the back end of that, there are 2 different options that the Pittsburgh Steelers can reportedly or are reportedly interested in. Both of them are stunners, and we'll dive into those soon. But let's start with Russ possibly going to Vegas. Pete Carroll gets hired by the Raiders. Obviously, everybody starts talking, oh, here it is. This is the bridge quarterback. This is how you do it. The way I look at this situation is I would be shocked if Russell Wilson didn't end up in Vegas solely because it just makes too much sense. Pete Carroll is not there to win a Super Bowl. Although if he did, that would be awesome. But he's not there to win a Super Bowl. He signed a 3-year deal at 73 years old or 74 years old, which means that he'll be pushing 80 by the time he's done. And unless it's there and they understand Pete Carroll's going to be back and he's going to do this thing again, I got a hard time believing at 77 the Raiders are going to say, we'll hand you 3 more years and we'll make this work. No. In my eyes, what this is a bridge head coach. This is the Raiders saying, we couldn't get Ben Johnson. We couldn't get any of these big names. Antonio Pierce didn't work out. We need somebody that we know is going to bring us forward and set us up for success in the future. Pete Carroll. He's going to add wins. He's going to take your team from whatever they sit 5th worst or whatever in the NFL to top 15 in the NFL, which is exactly what you're looking for. And then when he leaves, hopefully there's somebody else below him that you could hire as a head coach to say, look at our infrastructure is here. We've set ourselves up to be stable. Now we have to put the next leader in place and replace that guy. But that's a lot easier than finding a head coach year after year after year after year. So Pete Carroll's there to be a bridge coach, which is a very unheard of term in the NFL, but I think it's true. He's got to win games. He doesn't have to win a ton of games. He just has to set this team up to be a competitor. Obviously, the thought is win a Super Bowl, but chances are that's not going to happen. What brings you immediately from fifth worst team in the NFL, sixth worst team, whatever they are, to middle of the pack potential playoff team? A quarterback. And Aiden O'Connell might be the guy in 5 years. Probably not. Gardner Minshew isn't the guy at all. Russell Wilson is a guy that could probably get you to the playoffs. And if he doesn't, he's going to get you very close to the playoffs. He's a bridge quarterback. He could be there for the 3 years that Pete Carroll's there. He could be there for the 3 years that Pete Carroll's there. And in the last 2 of those years, develop a quarterback behind him like he helped Justin Fields do. And boom, Pete Carroll leaves, Justin Fields leaves, Russell Wilson leaves. And the Raiders have set up for a new day and age in Las Vegas with plenty of potential and 2 massive components that they just built below them. So in my eyes, it's the perfect scenario for the Raiders to say, Russell Wilson, come on to Vegas. Why not? You're better than what we've got. We don't have a draft pick high enough to land a quarterback. And who are we going to go get? Daniel Jones? That's not going to work, and people aren't going to be happy about it. Nobody's going to be happy about Russ, but at least they'll understand the process in it. I'm saying Russ ending up in Vegas is not a surefire thing. But I would imagine those talks that we were talking about last week, they're not happening right now. They have gone cold. Those phone calls are quiet right now. Phone ain't ringing on either side because Russ and his agent are talking with Sierra at home, Mr. Unlimited. Where are you trying to go? Maybe Vegas. Maybe I'm trying to go to Vegas, where I know the head coach. The head coach knows me. There's no competition with Justin Fields. Aiden O'Connell ain't going to beat me out. I mean, why not? Why not? I'm saying Russ is most likely going to end up in Vegas. I'll leave it at that one, but I'm going to say most likely. As the news broke, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, the one word that came to mind and the word of the day today is going to be stability for the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, think about who the part owner is. He's not the majority owner, but think of who the partial owner of the Raiders is right now. It's Tom Brady. He's starting to kind of make his mark on the organization. I understand he's only a minority owner, but you don't think that he doesn't have the ear of everybody else that's a decision maker in that organization? 100%. And they have been one of the most volatile organizations in the NFL. Everybody searches for stability. And I think that's what they're trying to do with the Pete Carroll hire. Hey, let's bring in somebody who's going to kind of calm everything down around this circus of an organization and get us just pointed in a direction. We need to figure out what the direction is going to be, but we need to be pointed in a direction. None of this up and down. Hey, we're in the playoffs this year. Now we're picking 7th overall. Now we're picking a guy that really is not going to make an impact. Now we're picking this guy. Now this is the quarterback. Now Derek Carr is the future. We're going to bring in Devontae Adams, and we're going for it all. And the next year, okay, well, we're going to go with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, and that's what we're going to do now. And it's too much volatility. I think if you're Tom Brady, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you want more stability. Pete Carroll fits in line with that. Get your organization settled down and get them sent on a trajectory. Russell Wilson fits that as well because you look at all the other options. Right now they're picking 6th in the NFL draft. You're not going to get Shedeur Sanders. You're not going to get Cam Ward, and that is far too high to pick anybody else in the NFL draft. Maybe you get somebody in the 2nd round. Maybe you get somebody in the 3rd. They're not a starting quarterback in week 1 in 2025. What is the most stable? And by that, I mean, I understand. We watched Russell Wilson go from 6-1 and he's all back to 6-6, losing 5 in a row. But of the quarterbacks available, you know what you got out of Russell Wilson more than you know what you got out of anybody else. I think that goes perfectly in line with the word of the day. That goes perfectly in line with the message that right now, to me, the Las Vegas Raiders are conveying, which is stability.
Yes, I 100% agree. That is all they're looking for. They haven't had it since Gruden. They haven't even had that. They didn't have it at the end of Gruden. They're looking for it now. That's been impossible to find. Hey, how do we figure this thing out? Okay, well, the first thing you do is you build the structure. You make that base. well, Russell Wilson's probably going to be part of that base. I had phone calls that make me think that Russ is and both sides are very interested in making this happen. It's early, things will change, but I have an idea that most likely he's going to end up there. And I was asked too, like, hey, what are your thoughts on Russ? I was like, I don't know. Russ don't have tall offensive linemen, and Russ could probably do very well. I was like, you build it and things will be okay, but he's not going to win you a Super Bowl.
I was going to say Jackson Powers Johnson isn't the tallest offensive lineman, so
that's true. He's a short guy. That's true. You just always I think he plays left guard for them. You just always kind of go to
over the left guard.
To the left guard. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. On the Pittsburgh side of things, if you lose Russell Wilson, you need a backup quarterback because Justin Fields will most likely be the starter in 2025. And we'll still wait on what's going to happen there, but chances are the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make Justin Fields their starter, especially if Russ leaves. Russ goes to Vegas. I think that's the second part of this is Russ leaves or you start to get the momentum that Russ is gone. Your sense of urgency for Justin goes through the roof. It becomes, no one can wait around for this anymore. You have to sign Justin Fields before you find yourself looking at guys like Daniel Jones or Gardner Minshew or whoever out there going, it's the best we've got right now. That's not, at that point, go trade back for Kenny Pickett and make it happen there. But it's the sense of urgency skyrockets the second Russ leaves the organization. But there were two names that emerged over the weekend as potential backups for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first one, familiar face for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a friend, an old quarterback who turned into a starter, whose journey in Pittsburgh, man. If you told me he left and there's any chance he's coming back, I'd tell you there's zero chance he's coming back. Pigs would fly before this guy stepped foot in the Pittsburgh Steelers facility once again for a third time. That guy started his career as a third-round pick. He was hated, or at least strongly disliked, by the starting quarterback who was supposed to turn him into the next guy after that starting quarterback. Was eventually promised a shot, not once, but twice. Didn't get either of them realistically. And ended up being the starting quarterback that led the Pittsburgh Steelers into the playoffs, benching and ending the career in a Steelers uniform for the guy that they drafted to be the next franchise quarterback. Wild times for none other than Mason Rudolph, who Jerry Dulac says could be an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Looking for a new gig after Tennessee. Went 1-4 as a starter this season, but come on. Can anybody win in Tennessee? I have a hard time believing so. Mason didn't look absolutely terrible. Definitely didn't look good, but he looked good at the end of his Pittsburgh Steelers tenure. Maybe they're thinking, that's a guy that comes back. There were guys in that locker room, I know this for certain, that wanted Mason to return in 2025 or 2024, that were hoping Mason Rudolph got the starting job for another season because they believed that he was capable of leading this team. Okay, great. The other option is a guy that on Friday, maybe it was Thursday, some point last week, you made the joke. He's just going to have to eventually sign with the Bengals if this is what happens. Well, maybe it does happen. According to Tony Pauline, Joe Flacco is a name to watch for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a name that is circulating around three teams right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the New England Patriots, and the San Francisco 49ers, all as a backup. He's 40 years old. He threw for 12 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, I believe, this season for the Indianapolis Colts, eventually replaced Anthony Richardson. Then Anthony Richardson replaced him. Not totally sure, but 2 years ago, the Cleveland Browns led him to the playoffs and looked damn good in the process. Beat DeMar Hamlin, who should have never in a billion years lost comeback player of the year, 4 comeback player of the year. That's how impressive he was in Cleveland. Joe Flacco is the other name. Those two names have popped up, and yeah, they're not super exciting, but man, are they worth talking about. Mason, Joe, I think the clear favorite is Mason. I have a hard time believing you sit here and say, go sign 40-year-old Joe Flacco. But do you have thoughts? I got a lot, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I think of the two, I would lean towards Mason Rudolph. One, because Joe Flacco's fine. We saw Joe Flacco firsthand this season. He took out the Pittsburgh Steelers when they were in a game where they should have probably won, right?
Yes.
They couldn't handle Joe Flacco. They couldn't handle the change of pace between Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. But I think at the same time, you look at what Mason Rudolph was able to do with the Steelers. I understand 1-4 with Tennessee. You're judging that as a backup going into a starting role on a team that ended up as a whole becoming the team that's going to pick first overall in this year's NFL draft.
Yes.
You look at what he did with the Steelers. He was 8-4-1 over his long tenure, but specifically last year, whenever you're called upon, you come in with very much a similar team and you win 3 games in a row. You do that. You take them to the playoffs. You give them, I would say, of the last couple of years, probably their best shot to win a playoff game up in Buffalo. I think one of the better performances we've seen out of a quarterback in the playoffs in the last handful of seasons was from Mason Rudolph. So I don't hate that as a backup. I think if you're talking starter, I don't even start the conversation. But when you're starting to talk, who's going to back up Justin Fields or who's going to back up whoever the Steelers go with, I think Mason Rudolph's a name that would make a lot of sense. And honestly, inside that locker room, inside the decision makers' heads of the Pittsburgh Steelers, it makes a lot of sense. Whether or not Mason would want to come back is a completely different question. I mean, if he wrote a book about his first stint with Pittsburgh, it would be a New York Times bestseller. At the very least, it would be an Allegheny River bestseller. Everybody in Pittsburgh would buy it because everybody wants to know, hey, what the heck happened to this guy? He was supposed to be the heir apparent, and then he ended up being somebody who's almost chased out of town, and then he finally redeemed himself, and when he redeemed himself, it was too late, and they sent him out of town anyway. But I think of the two, obviously, I'm going to lean Mason Rudolph. I just think that there's a higher level of play left in Mason Rudolph than there is in Joe Flacco. But at the same time, you could do a lot worse than Joe Flacco in the backup quarterback market.
I 100% agree. Joe Flacco would not be my pick. Wouldn't he be second, third, maybe fifth on my list? But I think you could be way worse than Joe Flacco. I mean, you could go into the NFL draft and pick some names that could be real bad as your backup quarterback. And Joe Flacco is not terribly low on my list. Mason Rudolph is high. Mason Rudolph's high on my list. I could see Mason Rudolph as Charlie Batch. I could see Mason Rudolph as like a real late career Byron Leftwich. Why not? A guy who sticks around for a couple of years, finishes his career in Pittsburgh as a backup, is able to be, he's the ultimate professional. Mason has been through hell in the city of Pittsburgh and within that Pittsburgh Steelers locker room, and he has always handled himself correctly every single time in every single scenario. He is great with young quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett praised the hell out of Mason Rudolph and how much he helped his develop. They're still friends, according to Mitch Trubisky. They still have a group text between the three of them, which is probably a lot of like, hey, Kenny, shout out, congrats on the Super Bowl. Steelers suck. But I would imagine that they're still that close because of the development and the relationship that they built within there. If you have Justin Fields, you want a backup who could help him grow. That's Mason Rudolph. The guys love him, and he's reliable when he steps in. I mean, he had a winning record in Pittsburgh. He was 8-4-1 as a starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's not terrible. The game that he tied against the Lions, I get it. That's the worst game you could possibly have of any team. But he was announced as the starter like 6 hours before the game because Ben all of a sudden wasn't able to go. That's like, you have an excuse there. I think Mason's not the worst option in the world. I think he's a pretty good one, to be honest with you. I don't know if he'd want to come back to the Steelers, but I also don't know where his options will be this offseason. Like, who's going to go out and be like, Mason Rudolph's our guy. Let's go sign Mason. Somebody will, obviously. There will be names that go out there and say, Mason's a good quarterback. Let's go get Mason Rudolph. But if you're the Steelers, bring him back to an offense where he understands his role. I think that's the best part here. I'd lure Mason in on a 2-year deal, give you some stability. If those 2 years work out, great. Here's another one. You don't have to worry about a rookie quarterback, or if you do, you go get a rookie quarterback with no expectations of him being the backup. If you're going to go get a Jackson Dart, if you're going to go get a Will Howard, if whoever, I don't think Jalen Milroe is being a QB3, but they're a QB3 in 2025, unless they're good enough to be a QB2, and you have time to develop them and see what happens. I just think it works out perfectly for both sides. If it is a guy that, unless Mason's looking for an opportunity to be a starting quarterback, which maybe he is, and if any year was going to present that opportunity, it would be this year. to say there are so many teams out there that need a starter, and Mason stinks with Tennessee, but maybe he doesn't stink in New York. Maybe he doesn't stink with the Jets. Maybe he doesn't stink with the Giants. Who knows? And chances are they're not going to get much better, but there might be opportunity for him. I think it works out for both sides. I'd go get Mason Rudolph. I know a lot of people are going to say, don't go get Mason Rudolph. Screw Mason Rudolph. For a backup quarterback, I think you could do way worse than Mason Rudolph. And to be very honest, like if your better option is Daniel Jones, you're wrong. Because Daniel Jones is a shot in the dark. You have no idea if he's going to work out. You have none. You're taking a risk there. On a backup quarterback, you want to know what you're looking for? Stability. A guy that you know what you're going to get. You could care less if this guy is an 8-8 record as long as he could get you some wins when he's in there. That's Mason Rudolph. I'm full support of Mason Rudolph. I think this is a good move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wouldn't be surprised if it happened. I think it's more so Mason's side than like the Steelers could call Mason tomorrow. It's 100% if Mason hangs up the phone or not. That is where this goes to. So we'll see what happens. I like both of them. For the Flacco side of things, like you said, 40 years old. Not really much excitement left. I get it. He did some cool things in Cleveland, but who knows if that was just like a one-year splash. This is awesome. Didn't work out in New York. Didn't work out in Denver. I mean, maybe it just isn't. Maybe it's just over. Maybe it was just a one-year spark. He's not the worst name out there, but Flacco's a guy where I would go Daniel Jones. I would go Josh Dobbs. I would go a rookie before I went Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's a guy that, like, you know, if he's still sitting there in week 2, maybe I'm calling him to come be on my practice squad. Hey, come hang out, you know, great. But I want to see what Skylar Thompson has before I'm giving the job to Joe Flacco as my backup quarterback in the summer. And that's where I stand there. We'll see what happens. But there'll be names. We'll toss this one in here too. Noah, hear me out. Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton would sit above Joe Flacco, significantly below Mason Rudolph in that middle tier, still think he's done type of situation. You put him anywhere else?
No, that's about right for Andy Dalton. I mean, he's younger than Joe Flacco, therefore he gets the bump over Joe Flacco. If Flacco was 5 years younger, I think it wouldn't be a question and he'd be over Andy Dalton. But that's a good, hey, listen, we're talking about backup quarterbacks here. So the question is, if your starter goes out for 3 weeks, who are you confident can get you to 2-1? And yes, that's what you're making the list off of. This is not a, hey, if they had to be your starting quarterback for a year, who would you want? Because if you have to have a backup be your starter for the year, then your expectations should have been thrown out the window weeks before. So this is who can get you to 2-1 in a 3-week stretch if need be. And if that's the case, I think you labeled Dalton perfectly there. And I think you kind of organized it in a way that most people would agree with.
Yeah. Don't you see like Mason Rudolph kind of just giving you like Nick Foles energy? Like he did it, man. Like who knows?
Nick Foles is tough energy to follow.
It is. Mason Rudolph, I don't know, man. I think he could pull it off. All right. That's everything on our agenda today. I don't believe we have an ad today. No, we're good. With that said, then we're going to finish off the show the same way we do every single day on this Monday morning. It's a good one here in the Berg. It's exciting. We're talking a little bit of Super Bowl, a couple of backup quarterbacks. We're waiting for news to happen. I'll ask this question to you before we dive into questions because I have gotten this number of times. A lot of people have texted me over the weekend asking this question. You have a deadline in your head of like, okay, the Steelers haven't fired any coaches. It's not going to happen.
Not really, because I feel like the coaches that they would move on from are, I wouldn't want to say easily replaced, but there's going to be options late or deeper into the offseason to replace those coaches, right? They're not getting a new offensive coordinator. They're not getting a new defensive coordinator. And most of their big assistants, Tom Arthur's coming back, Zach Azzani's coming back. Most of these big names or the bigger names on the Steelers, coaching staff, we know are going to come back. If it's a Pat Meyer, you can find an offensive line coach, right? Yeah. If it's, that's the only name that comes to mind because it's the only name that's been talked about a lot. But if it's a special defensive assistant, you can find those guys. Like there's only so many of these jobs in the NFL there's always going to be people and capable people that can fill them. So I think at this point, there's no deadline simply because I think the highest names on the Steelers coaching staff are all coming back anyway. If there's going to be any changes, it's going to be towards the lower end of the coaching staff. The only name of note that I could see them changing out is Pat Meyer. And even that right now feels like, okay, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not in any rush. After the Super Bowl, everybody will be available, and that's when you're really sitting down and going, all right, let's hire these guys. Let's make sure it's happening. You're not looking for a GM. Is there any surprise in your head that Andy Weidel hasn't gotten an interview anywhere?
Not yet. I just don't think that he's at the point yet where he's going to start getting those interviews. I think that a lot of people are starting to look at what the Steelers have done in 2 years, but I think once you get to 3 or 4 years and the team starts to show like, hey, this is third year of Joey Porter Jr. Look at what he's turned into. This is, the offensive line. If it comes together, I think that's when, because that's Andy Weidel's bread and butter is the big guys up front. If he has a really good draft this year with the defensive front and that offensive line that he worked on very hard over the last 2 off seasons comes together, I think that's when people say, oh, all right, we should look to Pittsburgh because this guy's doing some things.
Yeah, I agree. Once that starts to happen, his best shot was the year he came to Pittsburgh, and after that, now it's about how can you develop these guys. And when they are developed, that's when those opportunities present themselves. All right, we're going to finish up the show the same way we do every single day. We're going to answer all your questions, so make sure you're tossing them in the chat. We'll get to all of them before we head out of here. We'll start with a statement / questions, but Nick, I'm going to toss it to you. What do we got?
Yeah, let's start with B-Shep23, who just says, Justin Fields is an elite NFL quarterback.
I think he's got potential to be an elite NFL quarterback, but I don't think he's an elite NFL quarterback where we stand today. What excites me about Justin Fields is that when he showed up in Pittsburgh, he wasn't very good. And by the time he was done being a starter in Pittsburgh, I thought he was pretty good. So what comes next? The next jump there is, he's damn good. And I think that could happen with a full year, full offseason of Justin is the guy. Let's formulate an offense around him. Let's make because that's the thing is, think about how much different the Steelers offense looks with Justin Fields getting a full summer to work on an offense. You have a ton more quarterback runs. You're running the option all the time. You're moving around. You're able to use Justin Fields' athleticism in ways you didn't use because you had an offense designed for Russell Wilson. And then 2 days before Russell Wilson gets hurt, so you're changing everything up completely without making it too crazy, and then you slowly add in those nuggets for Justin Fields without having any real idea if Russ is going to come back or when he is going to come back. You give a full summer, this offense looks a lot different because it's designed for Justin Fields. I do think it helps. We'll see if he's an elite quarterback. I'm not ready to say that yet, but I'm not even close to ready to say that yet. But he was a pretty good quarterback by the time he was done this past season.
All right, let's go over to Darian Miller. A lot of talk about the Ohio State running backs. That tends to happen whenever you win a national championship. But Darian says, now that both running backs have declared, what do you think of drafting our own Sonic and Knuckles Light in the Ohio State duo?
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome. The only problem I have here is there's no chance either of these guys get out of, like, they're not going to, if one goes in the second round of the Steelers, the other one's not making it all the way to the third round for the Steelers. That's where we'd run into problems. But I mean, who would you put as Sonic and Knuckles in any of these? You draft Henderson, you draft Judkins, and you bring back Jaylen Warren. Who's the Sonic? Who's the Knuckles? Right?
I would say Jaylen Warren is a Knuckles. I mean, right? I think that, like, he has speed, but I think he's more Knuckles. I think if you draft Henderson and have him and Warren, that's the best. If you're trying to, like, emulate a Sonic and Knuckles duo, I think Warren and Henderson would do that best.
I agree. It's crazy to think that the 5'7" running back
is Knuckles,
who's electric, is the guy that's going to punch you in the face. Like, that's the ground and pounder right there. But I agree with you. I think that would be my duo as well. I would love to see Henderson and Jaylen Warren. I think that mix would work out so well. And Ohio State creates good running backs, even the ones that are good. Master Teague showed up in Pittsburgh for 3 days and became a folk hero at training camp. Like, if Mark Robinson didn't end the guy's career, he would have been the guy. So Ohio State knows how to make some running backs. I would go Henderson.
And who knows, maybe if they draft Henderson, then maybe the Steelers actually figure out how to run a screen. They haven't been able to do that for a while. So maybe you were able to get that.
let's temper our expectations.
Temper
One step at a time here. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get the running back and then you figure out how to do things with it.
All right, let's go over to Sam, who says, Noah, Tomlin has been all in on Russ. What evidence do you have that they will not bring him back just to keep the standard?
I mean, the evidence is you could go with evidence that is apparent to the public or that is open to the public, and that is the way Mike Tomlin spoke about Justin Fields during his final press conference of the season, where he said things like Justin took the steps to be a 17-game starter, that Justin was very impressive, that Justin improved, and you could look at all that stuff and say, okay, there was a lot of Justin Fields talk here for a press conference where, you know, he said things like Russ, like the rest of everybody else, didn't play good enough at the end there. You could take that away. But you also have to go with what everyone is saying, what we're hearing on this show, and that is that word inside that building seems to be that Justin Fields is the favorite to be retained and be the starting quarterback in 2025, that the Steelers are looking to actually hit the standard and realize that 10 wins in a playoff appearance has become too mundane. I mean, you have guys like Jim Rooney, who's out here talking, saying, you know, that you can't go 3-6 and that the standard is still the standard. And, you know, 10 wins is a great season. And I mean, you could look at that and say, that's how someone feels. It's probably the wrong way to feel, but that's how someone feels. But inside that building, nobody's sitting there going 10-7 with the first round exit was good enough. It wasn't. People are pissed. Mike Tomlin's pissed. Rooney's probably pissed. Like there are people that are upset. They're looking to change things up. Just from what we're hearing report-wise, what I'm hearing throughout the offseason in conversations and sources and whatever, the evidence is all pointing to Justin Fields.
Let's jump over to DJ Thomas, who says, do the Steelers draft need and wants, or do they draft best player available? I know it's a double-edged sword at times. Maybe draft best player in rounds 1 and 2, then go needs and wants, aka depth. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a year where you have to go needs and wants. You have to. You could take best player available if it's a guy like Ashton Genty and you pick a running back over a wide receiver, or if it's, you know, for some crazy reason, a guy like Will Johnson falls to you out of the top 10. You're going, oh, whatever, like we might as well do this, or McMillan out of Arizona. If that's the situation, you could go best available. But this is a draft. This is an offseason where you need to strike big almost all the time. And that striking big can't be an outside linebacker. That striking big can't be another tackle. It has to be guys who will walk in, especially in the first 2 rounds, and make an immediate impact, be a day 1 starter, or at least a day 1, you are the first primary backup, and you are going to play significant snaps. They have to hit both of their first 2 picks in ways like that. They can't go best player available unless there's you can't draft Terrell Edmonds if Emeka Egbuka's there because you need a corner. But if it's Emeka Egbuka's there or whoever, a corner, a defensive tackle, something, you're going Egbuka, even if he is just slightly below where you're at. So you have to go with best need or most biggest need, because you need these guys to be contributors right off the bat.
Let's go to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, what's something you saw from the 4 defenses this weekend that you don't see in Pittsburgh?
Takeaways is a big one. Takeaways is definitely a big one. The Steelers did not have many takeaways near the end of that season, and that was huge. Josh Allen had a terrible game, but the 4 defenses as a whole, like people were just fumbling the ball. Josh Allen almost threw 2 interceptions on the first drive alone. Like that's what they're missing. That and pressure when it comes to teams like Philadelphia. Like Jaden Daniels is moving around all the time because Philly's getting to the quarterback. They're making noise at the quarterback level. And then the final one here is, I understand Pacheco and James Cook did their thing, but Philly's offense stopped the running game completely. Jaden Daniels was the running attack, and I understand Brian Johnson is not the standard, but they still did what they needed to do. I would say turnovers, the ability to run the football or to stop running the football for Philadelphia, and pressure on the quarterback, man, because it caused a lot of issues on both sides of the ball. That would be my big ones.
Yeah, the big one that I saw was the best defense all weekend was the Kansas City Chiefs. And that is a defense that has 2 superstar players on it and a bunch of no names.
Yes.
What do I see? I saw a defense that was well coached. What don't I see in Pittsburgh? A defense that is well coached. Sometimes the defense that is greater than the sum of its parts is better than the defense full of superstars that each do their own thing. And I'm not saying the Steelers do their own thing. I'm just saying a little bit better coaching wouldn't hurt on the defensive side of the football. And we all know who coaches that side of the football.
Agreed.
All right. Let's go to Cody Silva, who says, are you guys going to the Senior Bowl this year down in Mobile?
No, I'm not going to the Senior Bowl. Second year in a row, I won't be at the Senior Bowl. Just no real driving force to get me down there. You know, I think I have better resources up here than down there. The coverage for the Senior Bowl has gotten really bad. You know, I'd hate to call it out. I think the Senior Bowl is awesome and really good for these players, but it used to be where you were down there and you were able to get connections with agents and sources and that kind of stuff. You were able to have those conversations. You could interview players pretty much freely. It was awesome. You got all the access you needed to bring all the attention and all the work to you guys. Now it's extremely limited and it's overcrowded. You know, you have every podcast host in the world going down there to do nothing, just take up time and space. And, you know, there are a lot of people that are regulars at the Senior Bowl that no longer go to the Senior Bowl just because of how bad coverage has gotten. So I am not heading down there, although I just got this text from Nick Fairbaugh as we were doing the podcast saying, bro, I'm never driving down to Mobile again. This is awful. So shout out our boy Nick. Hope he's enjoying the 16-hour drive down to Mobile, Alabama.
Let's go over to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, if you could bring three Steelers historical coaches to coach the team next year, who would you pick and why?
I mean, that's Dick LeBeau starts that one. Chuck Noll, I mean, is the easy answer as a head coach. Oh, who's an offensive coordinator that I'd bring back? I don't know who, right? You'd have to really sit there and think about some good ones.
People say it all the time, and I know it might be a wasted pick.
You're going to say Todd Haley.
But Mike Munchak as the offensive
line. Mike Munchak's a great one. Yeah, that's a good one. I thought you were going to say Todd Haley.
No, I was not.
No, Mike Munchak's a fantastic one. Yeah, I'd go Dick LeBeau, Chuck Noll, Mike Munchak. Those are good 3.
All right, let's go to Carl Spackler, who says, just curious if I'm the only one. Anyone else have more fun rooting for our team in the Tommy Maddox days than the last 6 to 7 years? Honestly, had more fun being a spoiler on off years than what we've been recently.
Yeah, dude. Eventually that becomes old. I don't feel the same way. The Tommy Maddox years were awesome. Don't get me wrong. There was always the moments where you're going, Tommy's going to do it, man. This is going to be it. This is Tommy's game. And it wasn't. It was rarely ever Tommy's game, but once in a while it was, and it was awesome. Shout out Tommy Maddox, but the answer is no. I wonder one day if Bill Cow or somebody would have the roast and Tommy Maddox would show up. That would be. I haven't seen Tommy Maddox in a long time. Long time.
Tommy Maddox being the Drew Bledsoe of a roast.
Yes. The Drew, a much less Drew Bledsoe of the roast, but yes, I could see it.
All right, let's go over to Nate Moore, who says, how long till the Steelers finally sign a quarterback?
I have no idea. I said I expected it to be before the Super Bowl. We found out who it was going to be, and then right before free agency, we get the actual contract itself. I still kind of feel the same way there, that in the next 2 weeks, it's going to become pretty solidified what's going to happen. And then over the next month, it's going to become Justin's the guy. Let's make him the guy. Let's ink him to a deal. So I would say right around there. Yeah.
All right. Let's go to Pittsburgh Hornets again, who says, what is the best and worst Super Bowl snack?
Oof. The best is wings. I mean, that's without question. Or buffalo chicken dip.
That's where I was going to go with this.
I think those
wings
are
doesn't feel like a snack to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Either way,
the buffalo chicken dip is the class. You have to have buffalo chicken dip. I don't know. The worst is if somebody shows up with a veggie plate or something. But even then, I'm feeling good about it. You know, I'm munching on celery whenever I'm too full to eat, but still have to eat because football's on.
Yeah, sometimes you need that change of pace at the table. Now, what I don't
Yeah.
like is popcorn. Popcorn is a movie snack. I
Ew.
don't need popcorn at a Super Bowl party because
Who's
I got
bringing popcorn to
I've
Super Bowl?
seen it. I've seen it. It's not
Oh,
good. It's like, yeah, if I'm sitting down and watching a movie, there's nothing better than a good buttered popcorn. If I'm
yeah.
watching the Super Bowl, I got buffalo chicken dip there. Why do I want popcorn?
Dude, I'm trying to feel like garbage at the end of the night, okay? Garbage. I'm trying to eat so much food that I literally hurt going to bed. Popcorn ain't it, man. Popcorn
Mhm.
ain't. I'm just gonna be a greasy mess and in the wrong ways. I'd rather be buffalo chicken. Fingers are just like oily as nasty love and life. That's what I'm looking for.
All
Yeah.
right,
Gross. Popcorn.
let's jump over to BH, who says, "What do you think about JJ Watt coming out of retirement for the Steelers in 2025? And if he did, would the Steelers have a chance at going to the Super Bowl?"
I would love it. I mean, everybody would love it. Nobody would not love it. It would be awesome. I think the chances of it are very rare. Any chance or any year that passes where JJ hasn't come out of retirement is another year where he's less likely to come out of retirement. I don't think he's thinking about it unless the Steelers again were in a situation where they need that guy. Call him up. Hey, come on, come win a Super Bowl. Real late in the season could happen, maybe. If he did, I don't think it makes any impact on the Steelers' actual chances of winning the Super Bowl. I think it only has to do with whether or not their offense is any good this season. That is, I mean, watch the games yesterday. We could talk defenses all day. The final score of those games were 55-32 and what was it, 29-22, something like that.
29, 26, 32 to 29. Sorry.
32-29. Those are offensive games. So until the Steelers' offense is good, I don't think J.J. Watt's making a significant difference. That being said, would be incredible. Would love J.J. Watt to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
If there's any human being that could take 2 years off the NFL, come back and make some semblance of an impact, it's J.J. Watt, but he's not making J.J. Watt impact, if that makes sense, right? He's not going to be what he once was. He's going to be a shadow of that, but still probably somebody who gives you solid production as a backup or a rotational piece. It'd be great to see, but I think at this point, he's pretty comfortable with where he's at. And if he hasn't come back to this point, then he's probably not going to come back.
Agreed.
Let's go over to Grayson, who says, "Hey, Nick and Noah, hindsight being 2020, do you guys think we should have kept Kenny Pickett? The one game he started without Canada as OC, he threw 300 plus and multiple touchdowns."
I don't think the Steelers should have kept Kenny Pickett. I don't. I think their situation currently is significantly better than Kenny Pickett. Justin Fields being their backup plan, like, hey, maybe this is the guy of the future, looks way brighter than Kenny Pickett. Way brighter than Kenny Pickett. So I would say no to that. Kenny's issues are Matt Canada was a significant one. Let's not act like it wasn't. But Kenny's issues were he reads plays very slowly. He doesn't have a deep ball at all. And yeah, he looked good in Philadelphia for 2 games with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Gobert and Saquon Barkley, but that's not going to happen all the time. I think the Steelers situation right now with Justin Fields is their best situation possible.
Yeah, I was curious about this, Grayson. If you're still tuned in, throw it in the chat. Is hindsight looking at what Kenny Pickett has done? Because he looked like a cartoon character at times this season, trying to pump fake the ball and ended up tackling himself.
That would be that actually did happen.
Yeah,
it did actually happen. Shout out Kenny Pickett, man. Possible Super Bowl champion.
Sure. Trey Campbell said, would the Steelers consider bringing in VR technology like Jaden Daniels and Sam Darnold are using to help Justin Fields' development?
They do some stuff like that. I think a full VR would be very helpful. I do. I don't know, though. They do. The Steelers, for how old school they are, do have some analytical stuff, some like technology stuff that they do use on a pretty regular basis to try and help their quarterbacks in really all the positions, but the quarterbacks are the big ones. I wouldn't be surprised if next year they are bringing something like that in. I know some things haven't worked. Like they attached the camera to the quarterback's head, like the GoPro for a while. And from what I heard is once you actually played it back, it was just, everything was going nuts because you're moving around and there's a helmet on your head. So it wasn't very useful, but I could see that. I definitely could. And I think it'd be useful.
All right, let's go over to the next question here. I saw an article where the Texas Tech running back Taj Brooks said Steelers said he reminds them of Le'Veon Bell. I'm not familiar with the guy, but what do you think about Taj Brooks?
Yeah, I also saw the story. It was a good interview, and we were able to toss it up on SI as well, which I thought was very cool. And I think Taj Brooks is not Le'Veon Bell, but I don't think he's terrible. He's bigger. That's my thing with Brooks, is he's a bigger running back. Like he doesn't have the speed that Le'Veon Bell had. But then again, like Le'Veon was a big running back at Michigan State. I think that's the wildest part of the Le'Veon Bell thing. And maybe that's where the Steelers see him, as they compare him to Michigan State Le'Veon Bell, where like Bell at Michigan State was a big boy. He was a bruising running back. When he got to the NFL, he slimmed up. He got real fast. Like it was very impressive, the transformation Bell made in 1 year, like final year of college to rookie year in the NFL. So maybe that's what they're comparing him to, like the potential there to become a Bell. I could see that. I don't see it so much in college though. Like he's a bigger dude who he has good footwork and he's patient running the football, but he's just more of a bruiser than he is an explosive runner. And that's my only takeaway from that. I think he's a good back and a good option. And I expect him to go middle round this NFL draft, like, third, fourth round. He's in the mix of those. Like, I don't know. He's below a Caleb Johnson, but he's in the mix of those guys, of those like middle round. These running backs might turn into something candidates.
Grayson did check back in, says, I honestly did not pay much attention to Kenny Pickett this season, LOL, but I know he would have done a little better than he had previously.
That is very true. Would have done a little bit better. I still think Justin Fields, like the potential of Justin Fields versus the potential of Kenny Pickett is much higher. And I think that works out well for the Steelers if they choose to keep him and if he chooses to stay.
All right, let's jump over to the Savage Gentleman, who says, what are the largest shakeups or transactions that happen this offseason?
A couple of quarterbacks you'll see. When it comes to the Steelers, you're going to see cuts. Okay. You're going to see guys like potentially Larry Ogunjobi, Preston Smith gone. Cam Sutton's not going to come back. Maybe they go out and they get another corner. They'll probably re-sign Dante Jackson. Excuse me. George Pickens being traded is a massive one to watch. Massive one to watch. They're not going to bring back Najee. Where are they going at running back? A lot of those moves, those will be the biggest ones. Is I expect the quarterback to sign in Pittsburgh outside of Justin, and I expect some wide receiver depth to be added in some big ways. Chris Godwin, T. Higgins, maybe a possible trade. You never know. And I expect some defensive shakeups, especially along the defensive line, where Larry O, Dean Lowry, those guys are gone, and you bring in more candidates, maybe like a Javon Hargrave. Those are my big expectations this offseason.
All right, let's go over to Jackie, who says, realistically, how long does it take before the Steelers make another AFC championship?
That's so hard to tell. I could say that Justin Fields, if he works out well for the Steelers, gives them the best potential to make it in the next 2 years. That's where you're at, where you could go get wide receivers. You have a coaching staff. You have pieces like TJ and Cam and Joey in your defense that you could build around and make this thing great. It's really upsetting that you don't name Minka anymore when you're talking about those big names on defense. And you potentially have an offensive line if the offensive line all grows this offseason, which is very realistic because you have young guys who are supposed to grow, that offensive line could be a lot better. And if you go get a wide receiver, your wide receiver room's fixed, and maybe you go get a running back. I just think that in the next 2 years, the potential is very real for the Steelers to figure this thing out and to have a new, it's going to be so much change over the next 2 seasons that I could see it happening.
All right, let's go back to Grayson, who says, hey guys, I got a quick what if scenario for you. What if you put in a time machine and could combine our defense over this past few years with the Killer Bee offense? Pat Mahomes would have 0 Super Bowl rings if that was the case.
I'm not going to disagree with it. I'm not going to agree with it. I think Patrick Mahomes And that Kansas City offense is better than the Killer Bees offense, if we're going to be real. I think Andy Reid is better than look. You could look at stats all day. It comes down to one thing, and that is Patrick Mahomes. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's, Tom Brady didn't have the best offense and he didn't put up the craziest numbers. He still won 7 Super Bowl rings. That's sometimes it's just the quarterback. Sometimes it's just the coach. Andy Reid, I'd put up against anybody at any time in any NFL era. So I would have a hard time agreeing with it, but I wouldn't disagree with it. I think there's a possibility that the Steelers are like just an absolute dynasty in that mix. I think that that's a real possibility.
If you could add that to what we've seen in these playoffs alone with Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, the Killer Bee Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger at that stage of his career against any of those three, I think that'd be peak television. I think if I had to add one thing, I would add first 5 years Mike Tomlin, bring him into the mix. If I had to bring in somebody from this recent era, like I'd like to bring back Cowher. I was a Cowher fan, but if you're bringing back any version of Mike Tomlin to help out that team, give me the first 5 years of Tomlin.
Yeah. And his coaching staff.
and his coaching staff.
Yeah. I agree. Right. I agree. I think it would be, that would just be the next one. The Mahomes versus Ben showdowns would be awesome. That'd be the best thing ever.
Let's close it out with Mike G, who says, do y'all think that maybe the Steelers tag Najee Harris?
I do not. The tag is going to be expensive. I think it's like $12 million or something this season, maybe 11.5. That's too expensive for Najee Harris. I don't see it happening. I think Najee goes somewhere else. The only way that I see him returning to the Steelers is if he doesn't get that big offer somewhere else and the Pittsburgh Steelers look at him and say, all right, well, we could offer you a low-end contract and you could come back for a year and you'll be our running back. I think that that's a possibility, like what Juju did before he went to Kansas City, what Terrell Edmonds did before he went to Philadelphia. Like that's what I could see happening. I don't see it happening, but if he was going to return, that's the scenario that it would take.
All right. That's a wrap for today then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on this Monday morning episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow afternoon for another live stream. With that said, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg.